Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Engaging Thoughts. Today we have with us Tsering Lama. Tsering Lama, can you please introduce yourself briefly?
So I'm Tsering. I was born in Nepal with my family. They were Tibetan and they fled from Tibet, like many others. And I moved to Canada when I was 12. And then now I'm in New York, just doing my master's in fine arts and creative writing.
Right. So can you tell us about how you became interested in creative writing?
I think I was always interested in reading. I grew up reading a lot of Archie and like silly books,
Right.
but that's sort of, it allowed me to imagine different worlds
Right.
and places outside of where I grew up. And then as I got older, I took creative writing classes here and there in high school, and I realized that there was nobody really writing about people that I knew, like Tibetans,
Right.
and all the stories were about Westerners.
Right.
And I was kind of wondering, how come nobody writes about like my relatives and like people that have experienced what people I know have experienced. And so I felt like there was an opportunity for me to express that myself. And I've always loved the English language and literature, and so it just felt like a natural thing. Like I had a story to tell, but I also wanted to be part of this long and great tradition of storytelling. So yeah.
Okay. And what is creative writing to you? What is the meaning it has to you?
To me, it's the things that interest me about creative writing. One is that it's you can do whatever you want. You have freedom to write anything. I tried to write like nonfiction, but I end up just starting to lie. Like I just can't help it. I'm like, maybe this is better. Maybe this is more interesting. So I feel like with fiction, you have a lot of freedom to create and manipulate the world to make it work for your story. But I like writing, and I like sort of literature because it's a way of understanding the world. It's a way of understanding human beings. And I think that when people become writers or when they start writing stories, something happens to them in their brain, and they just start observing much more, and they start looking for patterns or narratives, and you realize that 99% of life is story, and it's what you tell yourself about yourself and what you tell yourself about the world and your other people in your lives. So it just feels like a good way to live life and move through life to understand it that way.
Right. And you said that you were originally born in India, then you moved to Canada, and now you are in the US. So how does traveling through different places, experiencing different cultures, does it come through your writing? How does it affect?
Yeah, I mean, so I was born in Nepal, and it just felt like I always had my foot in a few different worlds at the same time, because I attended international school in Nepal, so I would go home and speak Tibetan, and then I would go outside and play with my Nepali friends and speak Nepali, and then I would go to school and speak English with my like American friends, and so I always felt like I was a few different people in the same day, and I think that's kind of like the fun part of being a writer too. You get to step into other people's worlds and imagine what their life must be like. So that's why I like to write too, is just to imagine other people's existence and how they see themselves and how they see the world.
And then what I find is that as Tibetans, and we move around the world, and how you describe that, you feel like different people because you have your Indian friends, you grew up in a Tibetan community, maybe you're studying somewhere else where there are no Tibetans. And there's a great potential for writing, for expressing yourself. And I meet people who seem very talented and who can express themselves, but they are not sure of pursuing writing as a profession. They say, okay, I enjoy writing, I enjoy literature, it is my hobby, but very few people pursue it as a profession. So what is your perspective on that?
I mean, I could understand that on one level. You need to be able to like eat and live before you think about literature, and it's definitely like it's usually people who are quite privileged that get to be writers, even in communities in Asia and Africa and anywhere else. It's usually the people who are sort of upper middle class who get that opportunity, and I don't pretend that I didn't have that. I was quite lucky in that I received an education that allowed me to pursue something that was interesting rather than necessary. But I don't think it's ever too late to start writing. I think I actually I was a playwright as well for a while in Vancouver, and I took a playwriting workshop they invited young new playwrights in Vancouver, and I was the youngest person there, and everybody else was in their 50s, and they were incredible playwrights. They had so much story to say, they had so much life experience, and they were just like bubbling over with things they wanted to talk about. So I think it's never too late, whether you're 19 or 50, whether this is your first language or your fourth. If you want to tell stories, really it just comes down to work. You put your head down and you just write, and and then you share with other people and you get feedback. Right. And so it's really about the work, and it's good to have a community of writers. Find your friends who want to do that and get together and share your stories and say, what did you think of that? And find out whether what you thought you wrote is actually what is on the page, because that's the biggest learning curve. It's like you think that you wrote something really brilliant, and then somebody reads it, and what you thought was a tragedy is a comedy to them. That's like, then you have to and that's really the best thing about being a writer, is having that community of other people who are kind of crazy as well, because you have to be a little bit crazy to be an artist in anything. It's not, you're not an accountant. You're doing something that's slightly insane, but you have to be okay with that.
And in your own process of pursuing creative writing, what are some of the challenges that you have faced along the way?
I think one major challenge, which I'm sure a lot of other Tibetans face, is, the challenge of being the representative of your nation, your struggle, your history, everything that's going on with our people. It's a big, issue in our lives. We all think about it every day. Yes. And it's hard not to feel like you have to write that into your stories, and you have to convince people to help Tibet every single day. And of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can limit you as an artist if that is the primary thing. I do believe that everything is political. I don't think there is such a thing as a non-political story, because if it's not political, it's saying that everything's great. So if you're writing about a bowl of fruit, and that's all you're interested in, you're saying that life is great, and all that matters is that bowl of fruit. Silence is also compliance in a sense. So I think everything is political, but nothing is one thing. Things are not just political. Things are not just love stories. Everything has many, many layers, and so as a writer or as an artist, I guess, you should always be thinking about not just the Tibetan experience, but like the human experience, and how to make it relatable to everybody. There's like that saying that, one death is a tragedy, a million death is just a statistic. People can't deal with just numbers. People need a story. And so I think just focusing on the emotions of a person and the complexities of one human being is a challenge enough, and the truth will just kind of come in.
So you were telling about how sometimes when the numbers are too big and you're just talking about statistics, it's kind of like people can't connect to it and relate to it. And in some ways, do you think being an artist is art? Like, what do you think is the role of art in our politics, in our struggle? Is this how an artist contributes to the Tibetan struggle?
Yeah, I think art has always been a very important tool. It can be used for propaganda, but it can also, which I think is a way of dividing people, or it can be used to unite people and to let people see sort of a common human experience across all nationalities or geographical limits or anything like that. And so I know that the stories like that, speak to me the most are often, very personal stories. So like Persepolis, that it's a really great way to learn about Iran and the repression that women faced, and everything that went down there is very interesting. But why is that interesting? Because it's told from the perspective of a little girl, and her whole life is there in that book. And so then I feel much more connected to it rather than just listening to a news report or listening or watching like a presentation by an academic.
Right.
So I think art is what moves people, and art is what touches people in a much deeper level. In the best way. I think it makes us all unite.
Right. So, in the Tibetan world or in our diasporic culture, how do you see the art or like artists in form of like creative writing or painting, and what is the future that you see?
I feel like a lot of people don't know that Tibet has such a long history of literature, and we actually were really important in terms of literature all across Asia. And a lot of it is religious literature, but that's not to say that it didn't have artistic merit. There was beautiful writing for centuries in Tibet, and I think now we're seeing a revival of that inside of Tibet and also in exile. And I hope that there's more and more diversity, because it shouldn't all be political. It shouldn't all be religious.
Right.
And I think a thriving community is dependent upon a thriving art scene. And so I hope that more and more people will pick up their pens and feel like they can be empowered to do this, because we all have to start at a really low level, and it takes 10,000 hours of practice at anything to become an expert. That's what they say, right?
Yes.
So we all have to start somewhere, so that in a few years, we can be like the Jewish community. We can be like the Indian community in terms of the prolific amount of writers those communities have.
Right.
It's because they have a real sustained interest in education and in literature, and they push that.
Right.
And so we need to be doing the same thing,
Right.
not just saying we should all be politicians or we should all be nurses, and of course those are important professions. But
Yes.
we need more than bread and butter, and
Yes.
we need like heart in art.
Right. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it. So, like, you said earlier that in some ways, being an artist, like you have to have certain privileges, or you got this education, you got the time to sit down and think and reflect and rewrite. And for students or for people in general, Tibetans who are interested in doing that, right, but who might not have the access to a kind of education that is available in the U.S., for example, what would you say to them? What can they do on their own right now, where they're as in the situation that they are? What can they do?
Well, I think they can go to get a bunch of books, and of course that itself is a challenge for many people.
Right.
I hope that there's libraries. I know that there are some libraries being built in Dharamsala. Get books, borrow books.
What kind of books?
Go to the classics. Go get Moby Dick, and go get Anna Karenina, and go get all the classic books of English literature. That's if you want to write in English. If you want to write in Tibetan, go get all the important Tibetan books, Milarepa's 10,000 Songs, or whatever, and learn from your masters, and then start to imitate them, and then you'll see that once you start to imitate them, you can't. And you can only write the way you write. You can only be the person you are, and you're only going to be the writer that you are.
Right.
And your own personal voice will insert itself. And then number 2, find a community, find other people. Put up a little sign in McLeodganj. Writers unite. I don't know, and get together and talk about it. And you'll see that actually a lot of people are interested in writing, and there is a thriving community of writers in Dharamsala.
Are there any like online communities that people can look into of Tibetan writers? Do you know of any websites?
Yeah, I believe there's Tibet Writes.
Yes.
That Tsundula and Bujungla are part of. I think there's more and more. I'm not sure. I mean, like, I'm part of Lakar Diaries.
Right.
And that's more about, like, the Lakar movement. So it's
Yes.
not really primarily about literature. But, those things are easy to start. Start one.
Right. So, I think like for creativity to come, like especially for students in the school, the environment has to like really encourage students to be creative, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the English language that is taught in school, and how to encourage students to be creative in pursuing like in studying the language, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think one thing that American students have, which maybe is not pushed as hard in the East, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's like this overabundance of self-confidence. I teach writing at Columbia as well with freshmen, and they are all extremely confident people, even when they're wrong. And, and they just believe they're always right, and that's a problem because they're not always right, and you have to be. You have to have some humility.
Right.
But maybe that confidence is what leads to risk-taking. And to take risks is the key to being original in any way. You have to take risks. So you cannot be constantly wanting to stand in line. You have to be a nonconformist, which is somebody who wants to go, who's deliberate and wants to go against what is expected.
Right.
And so I think for Tibetans it's difficult. We live on other people's charities, and that's the reality. We don't have any rights. We don't have a land, and so we do depend upon other people's charity. And so as a result, we sometimes feel like we have to be what they expect.
Yes.
And but I think also give some people some credit. They can handle it that we're human beings, and they can handle it that we have thoughts that are not just monk-like.
Yeah.
So I think it's important for Tibetans to feel like they can be outside of that norm, and they can challenge people, challenge themselves, challenge their community, and challenge other people who view us in a certain way.
So Tsering, thank you so much for spending time with us. Do you want to end with any message or something that you would like to say to aspiring Tibetan writers or students in general?
I would say have confidence in your dream and pursue it. Take advice and take criticism from people who have been doing it longer than you. I would say don't define yourself as a Tibetan anything. Define yourself so that you're the best in your field. Be the best writer that you want to be. Be the best musician. Be the best artist. Be the best graphic designer. Because we don't have to just compete as Tibetans. We can compete with anybody in the world. We're talented people. So just, see yourself as part of whatever field you are, and don't use being a Tibetan as a limit or as a title that you think you have to carry with you. That stuff will come innately. So I would just say, be confident and take advice and listen to people who know more than you, and the feedback is important. So that would be it.
Okay, thank you so much.